Hey, it is Ron Callis here, and we are here for another episode of Automation Unplugged. Today is a special day in that it's not Wednesday. Today's Monday. Today's Monday, June 19th. It is a little bit after 12:30 p.m. And actually, the team at One Firefly, we're actually closed here in the U.S. Our U.S. operations are closed today to celebrate Juneteenth. I think that is the newest federal holiday, and we celebrate that here at One Firefly. And we're just coming out of Father's Day. So I actually was on the road last week. I was up in Maryland and DC, and then ultimately Winchester, Virginia. I was in Maryland and DC with my son. He was competing in the National History Day competition. So my wife and I were up there with him, supporting him in those efforts. And he had a blast. He didn't come home with any hardware, but he had a lot of fun trying and made a lot of friends from, students traveling from all over the world that attended that competition, which was pretty neat. And then we went down to Winchester, and I got to spend some time with my mom and dad and my brother and my sister. So we had some good quality family time, and just got in last night, and here we are today. We are trying, as many of you that are tuned in likely know, we've been doing the Automation Unplugged show for many years now, over 6 years. April was our 6-year anniversary. And we're now trying to put out about 2 good quality interviews a month. And if you're following closely, you know that we have not met that mark here for the month of June. And so I'm very excited here to bring you show 245. And we're going to have a fun time interviewing my guest, Shawnon Parkinson, president of Zettacomm. And so without further ado, let me bring in Shawnon, and we'll get this party started. Shawnon, how are you, sir?
Doing pretty good.
Awesome.
How about yourself?
It's good, man. I got home. It's whenever you travel, I don't know if you experience this, but I never sleep quite as well as I do when I'm in my own bed with my own pillow. And so last night was nicely at home with my own pillow. So it was pretty fantastic. I'm doing great now.
Awesome.
Where are you coming from, Shawnon, just for our audience? They kind of know where you're based.
Well, first off, I'm just glad to be on the show finally. Been following it for quite some time and excited to be here.
We're excited that you said yes and you joined us.
Yes, sir. I'm coming from San Carlos, California, and this is my home.
So for those that are listening that aren't that great at geography, maybe like myself, what part of California is that? Is it the north and the south?
Well, it's kind of right in the center, close to the water.
Okay.
So it's in the northern end of Silicon Valley.
Okay.
There's a famous bridge that goes across the kind of center of the bay, with the San Mateo Bridge.
Okay.
There's like the Bay Bridge, and then there's the San Mateo Bridge in Dunbarton. So San Carlos is just a little bit south of the San Mateo Bridge.
Okay. Are you from that part of the world?
I was born in Lodi, California, wine country. Okay. Raised in the Central Valley of California. Came out here about 21. Yeah, I was 21 when I moved out here, so a few years ago.
We're using this software here, Shawnon, and every now and then technology will not behave. And I just had a message pop up here on my screen, and it says StreamYard has lost access to your LinkedIn account. Don't worry, we've got you covered. I'm going to click this button. I don't even know what's going to happen when I click this button, but let's go for it. I'm going to click this button.
All right.
and it is asking me to log in. All right, folks, we always live by the edge of our seat here, and it's asking me for a password. So I'm gonna attempt to do this. I have no idea if technology will in fact behave, but I'm gonna give it the password that it is asking for, and I'll see if this does it. If not, then I'm just gonna move on. Let's see here. Okay, I'm going to say yes, allow. All right. It says it's happy now. So
All right.
we'll see, Shawnon. You never
All right.
have technology go sideways, do you?
You know, sometimes.
Every now and again. It takes a lot of patience, right?
We try to engineer systems so that they don't do that, but you still got those outliers.
Tell us about the business, just a high level. What type of product are you doing? Resi, you doing commercial? Where geographically are you generally doing these projects?
We primarily focus on residential at this time. We're about 80-20. We do have some large commercial accounts, but we primarily focus on home automation and high-end resi.
Okay. And if I was just say, if you're doing a resi job, what's a typical project? And if you're doing a commercial project, what's a typical project?
As in size or
size, scope, kind of what type of technologies are you putting in? I mean, are you doing $5,000 jobs? Are you doing $500,000 jobs? And what are some of the common technologies in those projects?
Yeah, I think we it depends on the client, right? We try not to take on brand new clients for less than a certain amount. But I mean, if they're already a current client and they want something done, they just want something simple, we'll go in there and take care of them, no problem. But we hit a market that is for resi, typically like 50K and above, up to about $1 million. Is what we've seen. And then on the commercial side, it's more of up to depending on how big the commercial space is. Some of those spaces can get up into the mill as well, depending on how big we're doing. We've done some like 30,000 square foot remodels for commercial, and it's a lot of stuff going on in there.
That is a lot of stuff going on there.
Yeah, a lot of lighting, some shading, networking, a lot of AV install. So
on the resi side, are you comfortable? And if you aren't, don't answer this. Are you comfortable naming some of the typical product, maybe some of the brands you commonly will be putting in your projects? Like what type of control brands, lighting brands, some of the audio brands, like what's some of your normal or typical product mix?
I mean, I think, we focus primarily on the automation side. Savant is like our leader. And then for lighting, we primarily focus on Lutron.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what are some of the audio brands?
Audio brands?
Or is it all over the place?
It's a little bit all over the place. I mean, we kind of standardize on certain types of amps, but as far as the sources go, we're a little agnostic. We try to be a little agnostic and not lock people into something. In this area of Silicon Valley, it kind of, people want to do a little bit of their own thing. A lot of these guys wrote the code.
They did.
Yeah. They've written the codes for the wireless access points, the network switches, the Sonos units, you name it, right? So a lot of these guys that or I'd say a lot of the clients that we deal with, they want a little bit more of an agnostic approach, and they want a little more hands-on sometimes.
Sure.
Which some clients don't want any hands-on, and we take care of that. Some clients do want a little hands-on. We help them with that too, and set them up so that they can kind of toy around if they want to.
I'm going to pull a thread on that idea. You are in kind of the birthplace of so many technology companies. right there in Silicon Valley. And I would imagine a lot of the senior level executives are probably technical in nature. And when you're the integration guy, the integrator, are they like all up in your stuff when you're looking at how you're designing a system or how you're programming a system? Are they commonly asking to look under the hood and ask what you're programming or configuring it in? Or what is that like?
Yeah, we've run into that a number of times, where they asked for the software, then they just said, "Yeah, I can program it. I've programmed all kinds of things, right?"
Right.
And so they want the back end, they want the software that we have that we can't give them, and so it's a little bit, it's a hard conversation to have with a client because although they might be technically able to do it, it's, we're actually held to a certain standard on our end that we just can't break that line, right?
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes people, especially right now, there are a few people that we've run across that kind of want to just not put in an automation system at all, where it's just lighting, it's just shades, it's just some audio, Sonos audio, that kind of stuff. We are seeing that the systems overall are kind of morphing a little bit as far as what's going in, what's the control. A lot of people aren't wanting to be locked into a certain platform because of licensing, because of that, that yearly software cost. And so we are seeing that a little bit right now.
That's interesting. And I don't have the exact up to the minute details. It's June 2023. Are you referring to like the Savants or I don't even know, some of the other brands that now have like a licensing model for their control systems?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. How many out there are doing that these days? Because I don't know the answer. If you don't know the answer, that's okay. I didn't know if you were familiar.
I don't know the answer to that. I know Savants is doing that, and they are charging for certain levels of access, remote access, and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I was familiar that they were doing that at a high level. I haven't heard how well or not that's going, but that's interesting. Take us back in time, Shawnon. Help us understand where'd you come from? How did you end up here running this successful integration business? What's the backstory?
Well, it was all grassroots. So everything that I made over the years, just kind of put it back into the company, and that's how it's gotten to where it is now. Sure. I guess, starting back, I moved to the Bay Area for just going to college. Helped start a soccer camp for special needs kids called e-soccer, and I was cool. Like one of the 3 original coaches on that camp. And
how did that work? How did that special needs soccer thing work?
It was good. So we had 3 soccer professionals, which I was I didn't go pro, but I played amateur in different levels of soccer my whole life. And so I was one of those 3 coaches, and then we had therapists as well. So physical therapists, speech therapists, and whatnot. And what we did is we took typical children and special needs kids, and we put them together. And then we allowed the special needs kid to actually be trained by the typical child, right? And so what that did is it kind of created a camaraderie and a bond between the 2 kids. And that would last for a long time after soccer camp, right?
Like a peer or a friend, a mentor.
Totally.
Kind of.
Yeah. And it worked. I heard stories of some of the kids, going through high school, and one of the kids getting picked on, and a kid that knew him because of the camp stuck up for him and kind of pulled him aside, and it was really good. I heard some really cool stories of just the success of that peer-to-peer relationship. But also we did a lot of studying on, what was the best sport to do. Why do we choose soccer, right?
Yeah.
And soccer was the thing that eye to foot coordination comes first. eye-to-hand coordination comes after. And so teaching children to know that they have feet and where to put those feet helps them become better sports players in general, right? They become better basketball players, better baseball players later on when they actually get the eye-to-hand coordination. And so that was one of the things. And another thing is, due to a lot of special needs kids, they don't actually have muscular stature in their legs. That's really a problem of building muscle. Because they don't move the same that typical children
They're
do,
not running
right?
and exercising
Yeah,
like a
exactly.
normal kid is. Yeah, I can see that.
So yeah, so we decided to go with soccer because of those factors. Yeah, and it was really successful. It really helped a ton of families. Families in the Bay Area. There's a lot of families that had special needs kids and they didn't really know what to do with them, so they just left them at home, kept them in the house, like didn't really get them out and do stuff with them. So it was really an outlet for families who just didn't feel like they had any hope. We really became like a center of hope for a lot of families and kids. So
That's
it was beautiful.
brilliant. I had no
Yeah.
idea. I've now known you for a bit, Sean, and I didn't even know that story. That's why we do these podcasts, to
Yeah.
learn these special nuggets. What
Yeah, man.
what happened with that business? I mean, or that thing? What and where'd you go next?
Uh, I mean that business is still. I mean, I did that volunteer for 10 years, um,
Wow.
and just every weekend, and that is still going on now. Um, Part of the reason why I had to quit was because I got another job that was kind of just I was traveling a lot, and I'll get into that in a little bit. But it wasn't fair to the kids that I was gone, every weekend. I'd come back one weekend a month, and it wasn't enough, right? The kids need that constant contact, and they need consistency, and I wasn't there enough. So I just stepped down. It was
What do you want to
it was
mention what
best, it
that
was best for the
website
kids.
is, in case anybody wants to check it out?
Yeah, you can look it up. I think it's esoccer.org now.
All right. Well, I'll have my
Yeah,
team. They're tuned in here. Carla or Kim, they'll grab that and put that in the show notes
yeah,
and down in the comment stream as well.
awesome. So while I was going to school, I obviously needed to make money out here in the Bay Area to live and to house myself and whatnot. So in college, a lot of different types of projects, a lot of different jobs. Worked at REI, worked at PetSmart, worked at just did all kinds of different
I
stuff,
love a
right?
good REI store. I could just go in that store and get lost for half a day and
Oh
be totally
man,
happy.
yeah, yeah. I worked sales in the camping department, and it was really fun.
Oh
I
yeah.
think I was one of the only one. I think I was one of the only guys there. My boss pulled me one time. I got a tip of like $100,
At the
and
store?
at the store, yeah.
Wow.
This guy and his wife were in there, and he wanted a bunch of camping equipment and whatnot. And I walked him through, and just helped him buy everything, and I just was really educational about everything. And he was so grateful. He just like gave me a handshake with $100 in it. And I was like, awesome. I was a college kid, right?
Yeah.
And
That's a good
so
couple of weeks worth of beer right there.
totally. my my boss, I went back into his office. We weren't supposed to accept tips, and I kind of knew that, but I said, hypothetically, Richard, um, if I got a tip, or if someone were to like give someone a tip, like could we accept it? And what if it accidentally like fell in my pocket, like what should I do with that? Am I supposed to give it back? Like how does that work? He's like, well, we're not supposed to accept tips, but how much did you get?
He's like, well,
I
if you
told
split it with me,
totally.
it might
I was
make
like,
it more legit.
I was like, I got $100. He's like, I didn't hear that. He's like, keep it, but don't do it anymore. I was like, all right. It's
That's
kind of funny.
cool.
But yeah, so after that went
Sounds like
to
there was a lesson there, though, of educating people and helping people, and you see this response you elicited in that customer. I mean, was that
yeah,
an
it's a
eye
good point.
opener for you?
You know what? I don't think I've ever connected those dots. But it's possible. It's highly possible. I've always been an entrepreneur since I was a kid, whether it's starting, lawn mowing businesses and, growing up in, in Central Valley, right? There's just not a lot going on. I did paper route when I was 11 years old. So I was 18, carried me all the way through high school. I was working at a grocery store, going to school, playing soccer and doing paper route. So I was always like super high activity and always on the move, right? So, yeah, I think that has always carried with me. So doing things that were, either sales or something good for somebody, and somebody was able to reimburse me with a monetary means. Yeah, that was part of the salesman in me, I guess.
Yeah,
right.
That makes sense.
Going into the story a little bit more, from just going into college, working at REI and whatnot, I needed to try to figure out some kind of a career move. And so a buddy of mine who did IT for a lot of big firms up in the city, he told me, he's like, hey, you want to go help my friend, pull cable and do all this kind of stuff? And I was like, sure, it sounds fun. So I went up and met him, and he happened to be a teacher in the IBEW, International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, in San Francisco, Local 6. And he was a teacher at the Junior Apprentice Training Center. And that was pretty much the start of where everything kind of came from. I got accepted in. I started working for an electrical company in the low voltage side, which is the sound and comm division. And I did that for a number of years. We built, Jewish Community Center. We redid the ferry building. We did all kinds of really fun stuff in San Francisco, a lot of high-rise builds. And we also did a lot of the pre-wiring for other firms. So I did a number of years doing that. The pre-wiring that we were on one time was for Apple computers stores, the retail side. Mm-hmm. And so we did, a number of stores all over the Bay Area. And one time when we were over in Emeryville, which is just another store that they're building, we did all the wiring there. And this guy comes up to me and he said, I didn't know who he was at all. Kind of a bigger, kind of burly guy. He worked for this other company, which I found out later was the AV company for Apple. That is contracted. It wasn't like directly for Apple, but he said, hey, is this all your work? I said, yeah, it's my work. He's like, you want a job? And said, sure. What does it pay? What's the benefits? He's like, well, this is what we're going to do. You can fly around with me and build all these stores everywhere. And I was like, awesome. So I was still in the union and doing this on the side. And then I did that so much that I ended up just like quitting the union. And I did that for a number of years, flying around, building Apple stores all over the United States. And that was a fun time.
What was that like? What sort of technology was going in? What year would this have been approximately?
There's a number of years, but it was like 2000, I want to say 2003 to 2008.
Okay.
Something like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
2003. And so you were working on the Apple stores. What tech was going in the stores? What were you working with?
AMX gear. AMX was the main thing that they were doing there. NEC displays, AMX gear, and I think we were doing Bose speakers at the time. And they'd put them up inside the ceilings, and they would stretch these fabrics. The George family would do. They had the contract to do these like crazy stretch fabrics, and the ceilings were transparent acoustically, and so the speakers would you'd just be invisible. And that was the way that's the way they did invisible speakers back then.
Wow, I didn't even think about when you go into an Apple store today. Is that how they do it today?
It is. Yeah, they still do that. They still have those like stretch fabrics, and they put the the speakers behind the stretch fabrics. Yeah.
Any sort of memorable Apple Store stories or technology decisions you made along the way working in all those projects?
Yeah, there's a lot of stories, tons of stories. Um, but I would say one of them was really cool because I lived here in Silicon Valley. I was close to corporate, and one of the things that uh, they wanted to do is they had a secret store that they worked on, and that's what they would was building with no windows in this one area that they would literally build a store inside that was exactly a replica of what was going to be presented to the public. And Steve would come in, and Ron Johnson and Steve Jobs would come in and look at these stores and be like, "This is what I want. This is not what I want." And they would say, "Move this over, move that over," right? And so once that was finalized, then they would blueprint that and take that around, the United States and develop that and build that. And one of the things that they were going for I helped them do remodels from like their different vintages. There was vintage A to vintage B, and then vintage. They would jump from A to C sometimes, and those construction projects were pretty extensive, right?
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that when they were starting to go to from the Corian panels, do you remember those Corian panels? Are you familiar with a lot of Apple stores?
I would have been in those stores, but my memory doesn't, I don't recall exactly what they look like. But I've
So
probably been in every evolution, I imagine.
totally, yeah. They had ones with wood floors with Corian, like kind of kidney bean tables, and then they had ones with the Corian panels on the back walls with the displays behind them. And then they had like the Genius bars and the iPod bars, and so that was a fun time because we went from the different vintages, and then they got to the stainless where they're now. And one of the problems was, well, when we put the stainless panel in, how do you get to the TVs? How do you move the TVs? How do you line them up? Because they were, etched perfectly to the size of the display. And so how do you set that TV so perfectly with adjustments so that you can, do it quickly and easily in one time, right?
Mm-hmm.
We got to the point where they were using peerless mounts, and peerless mounts had a certain amount of sag at a certain, length off the wall, and the display NEC displays were not light, right? So you'd lose half inch sometimes, and so you'd bolt this thing to the wall, you hang the Corian panel up there, and depending on the mount, depending on the amount of sag and how far that back wall was, you had to kind of calculate a lot of that into that kind of calculation.
That sounds like a nightmare. And this is Apple. So if it isn't perfect, you got to go redo it, right?
Well, you had to pull the dang thing off and then go back there and lift the whole mount, pull the bolts out, lift the mount, put it back on. You had to have a whole team of guys to lift those Corian panels because it takes 6 guys to move 2 TVs, and so it was a pain. And so one of the things I told him, I said, hey, just buy the top mounts on the market, get them all here, and I'll go ahead and just tell you what I think of them. And so I ended up looking at all of them, and we ended up choosing a certain mount that they still use today on all their
You want to give that manufacturer a shout out? Who was it?
Chief.
Is it any particular model?
The PNRUB, I believe, the crab arm.
And that was a long time ago, so I'm impressed you were able to just shout that model number out.
Yeah, it's still a good mount. We've used it still. It was made a long time ago, and it's a very good design.
That's the scissor, the double hinge version of the mount.
It looks like a big crab arm. It kind of comes out this way. It's real thick, round kind of arms. But the real cool thing about that is the vertical adjustment. So after you install that, if you had to, minutely move it up 1/4 of an inch or even 1/8 of an inch because the bezel was showing, of the display when you push it up against, right? you can actually just go back and just adjust the mount to make it look right. You didn't have to pull
So you
things
have a
off.
micro adjustment on the mount so you could shift the vertical height of the TV and dial it in.
That was very important.
Oh my gosh, that had
Yeah,
to have exponentially simplified the installation in those stores.
100%. Yeah, yeah, it
Holy,
was
and they
really
gave
good.
you a percentage of all those savings, right?
Oh yeah, for sure.
That's how
Yeah,
that worked.
I'm still checking. I'm still cashing in.
You're still
Yeah,
cashing those checks?
yeah, yeah.
Somehow
Right.
I believe that's not the case.
That's not the case. But
That's cool. So how did that experience, where'd you go from that experience doing the Apple Store stuff to ultimately starting Zettacomm?
well, I think at one point, I mean, I just got tired of traveling, right? It was really tons of travel.
Yeah.
Kind of wanted to have a girlfriend and come back home. And it's really challenging to have a girlfriend when you're on the road, 30 days out of a month and then take 2 weeks and then you're out there for 30 more days, Not a lot of women want to put up with that kind of lifestyle.
No,
So,
not the women you want to take home to mom anyway. I empathize with that statement or that idea. I traveled for Lutron and Crestron for almost similar 2000 to 07. And I just found the lifestyle so hard, the on the road stuff. So I finally settled down. Even in my last job with Crestron, a job where I had to travel less. I just had to drive. At least I wasn't on an airplane. And then ultimately with, obviously this business, I found it in late 07. I'll go to shows, but beyond that, it's easier. And it's and in my case, I actually got married in 03. So I ended up, living through that lifestyle of travel, and that's very stressful on a relationship. And then ultimately, when I started the business, one of the big perks is I didn't have to travel anymore and I could actually be home. And it was at that point that we actually, had our child Max in 2008. So yeah. So shout out to my wife. This 2023, 2003. This year is our 20-year anniversary.
congratulations.
Thank you. I appreciate
That's
that.
that's
I don't
amazing.
think she listens to this podcast, so I don't think she'll actually know that I'm giving her a shout out, but
Yeah, it's all good.
there you go. It's all good.
Thought that counts.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
So take me back to Zettacomm.
So, when I actually was out traveling, I would come back for a few weeks. I was actually taking up some side work just because I was bored. Taking some little time off. You can only play so much golf and, go out and do so much that you're just like, okay, like I want to keep going.
Yeah.
So I picked up a ton of side work. And so the company wanted me to move down to LA, and they kind of had gotten to the point where I think because I was local, they kind of wanted a little bit more control on cost and, what they can actually bill for. And if I was down in LA, then every time that, clients would actually, want services, then, it's plane flights and other things that they could bill for, right? So they wanted me to move down to LA, and I just LA. And so I said, you know what, that's fine. I'll just stop contracting. And I picked up a lot of side work. We just continued that side work. And one of my friends, we were talking, and he's like, "What are you gonna do, man?" He's like, "You got a ton of work." He says, "You're not doing contracting for this other company anymore. What are you gonna do?" So we were sitting at his house. At the time, I think he owned Force Brain. He now owns. His name is Jason North. He's the CEO of Sumo Scheduler, which is a great product. He was just chatting with me, and he was like, let's figure it out. What do you want to do? Like, do you want to start your own company or what?" And I was like, "Yeah, I mean, that sounds like a great idea. Let's help me brainstorm that." And so he's really good with computers, really good with graphics and all that kind of stuff. And so he and I just brainstormed. And at the time, I was doing a lot of communication, and so that's where the comm came from. And I was thinking of like, well, in the lineage of, information and the storage of information, which was bytes, right? You have tera, peta, exa, and zetta. And so it's like, oh, I want to think on that, right? And so this was 2008, before Zetta became a name. Zetta wasn't really being used at all at that time. And it's like Zetta is 10 to the 21st power. So it's 1 sextillion bytes.
Wow.
And which is funny now because uh, there's I think Seagate is making zettabyte drives. And so back then nobody was using that name, but I figured that, eventually they're going to get there as far as that storage. I think at the time terabytes were being used, right?
Right.
But now Zetta is becoming a more of a like household name because people are talking about Zetta drives. And so now that's kind of where the Zetta came from. So,
Got it. Oh, that's fascinating. Were you thinking forward enough to get Zetta.com? Zetta.com? That would have been that would have been a good get.
Yeah, no, I have a lot of URLs with Zetta, and there's a lot of, future that, which is the URLs and the future of Zettacomm and where we're going. I own a bunch of URLs in that range.
Okay.
So I was forward enough thinking to purchase a lot of those.
You have
early.
friends in Silicon Valley, so they were probably whispering in your ear, this is probably a good idea.
Yeah, no, none of them were telling me that, really. It was just like a personal thing that I just wanted to do.
You figured it out.
Yeah.
So in 2008, were you doing residential projects? Was that the type of work you were doing?
So yeah, we did. At the time, I was doing mostly commercial. And then I picked up some of the side work that I picked up in 2008 was starting to get into residential. I had a friend that was wanting to do some surveillance, and he wanted to do a bunch of stuff. And he was building a house in Atherton, which massive home, French style, 10,000 square foot home that was built out of all of the leftover marble from the palazzo. Like I guess they had a project that went belly up. They purchased a bunch of marble, shipped it all in from Italy, and it was just sitting in a warehouse. And my client bought this whole warehouse on pennies on the dollar and just had it shipped out to Atherton. So the place is immaculate. I mean, it looks like it kind of looks like a casino in Vegas. You just go in there, just like everything is just dialed, right? That's pretty much what his house looks like.
And that was your first project as Zettacomm?
That was my first residential project at Zettacomm. Yeah.
Holy cow.
Home theater, control.
Now you started that in 08 officially. I mean, that was, I feel for you because that's right when I started my business. And, at least in my case, it was humbling and nicely challenging. It forged me into what I am today as an entrepreneur, but trying to survive through that great recession period. What was it like for you? I would imagine out of the gate, you had very minimal overhead. So maybe it was not as hard for you as it was for some of the bigger, more established businesses.
Yeah, I think it presented its own challenges, I would say. A lot of the bigger firms that were in the area were shutting their doors. They were closing up, liquidating a lot of their assets, getting rid of their trucks. And, I've said this before, but I kind of felt like I was running around with like a broom and a dustpan, just kind of sweeping up what, because there's so many clients that just wanted stuff done, right? People were trying to find somebody, they'd call up and that company closed, or that company's no longer servicing that area because they just shut down part of the company. So that was that there was an influx of work, but I had to go find it. I had no marketing, I had no anything. It was all word of mouth, which is still how we do a lot of our business, right?
Sure.
But back then it was just really just all word of mouth. And so I got it was funny actually. I went on a date with a girl that was working for a VC in the area, and she was the executive assistant. And so she told me one time, she's like, "Hey, do you do this kind of install, or can you help my boss?" And I was like, "Sure." He's like, "Yeah, I need some lights done. I need some things hung. I need some like glass panels all hung." And he had like 60 glass panels that were like 2 by 2, and I lasered them all out and dialed it in. And he was so impressed with my install that he's just like, "I got some other work for you if you want it." And so he just started handing me around to a lot of his companies that they were investing in, because he was part of an incubator for Silicon Valley. And so that was a little bit of, a start of getting into a little bit more on the commercial side. And then what was funny about that is that commercial side that I was doing kind of led into a lot of the residential side, because those people who were, running those businesses had me come in and do their house, and then had me come and do their friends' houses.
Hmm.
And so that kind of led me back into a lot more residential work. Um, One of my really fun projects that we did over the years was hilarious. It's so much fun. Um, it was a company called Telepart. Telepart was a company that was started by a guy named Josh McFarland, who's still a really good friend. Um, it was a small company that was focused primarily on big data. And so they had a little spot in Burlingame, and I pretty much just did everything for him. Whatever he needed, I did it. Like hanging Christmas lights, just doing whatever like crazy thing that he needed done.
Sure.
And so I was just like, just working hard, right? Doing anything. We went from that space in Burlingame, and then he moved a few years later down the street, and we took over a garage. It was an automotive garage, fairly big one. It was 11,000 square foot garage. Had two really big roll-up doors, and I did everything in there. That project made TechCrunch magazine, and they did a video of it, and you could see the video, and you could see everything in there: the walls, the windows, the glass, the lighting, the emblems, the everything in there. I had my hands on.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it was really cool. We
I
had one of the things that he touches on in there was really cool too. Is he had an oversight. They didn't have any closets, and so they didn't know where to put a lot of the mops and paper, just different things, like just everything you need to have, right? That you just need a little stock on, right? And so he went and got a shipping container, and we just brought it into the building and just set it in the corner. And so we just had this really cool looking shipping container, but we wanted to do something with it. So he's like, "Sean," he's like, "Do you have any? What can we do? Do you have anybody that can like maybe spray paint this on the side?" And I was like, "Yeah, I got a friend that can do that." And one of my buddies, Apex, he does a lot of graffiti art. One of the best graffiti artists in the world. So I brought him in, and he did this. He spray painted like this big data right on the side of it.
So
And I
you
put LEDs.
randomly had like a buddy that just so happens to be one of the best graffiti artists in the world, like just in your back pocket, ready to go. Like,
A lot of phone numbers in that phone.
yeah, you've clearly picked up some interesting people along the way.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
I noticed on your website, so I'm actually going to share the screen now.
Sure.
I noticed, let me do this. I noticed on your website under, let's see, where did I find this? I think, yeah, recognition. That's in the menu. So if anyone that wants
Yep.
to go to Shawnon's website, it's zettacomm.com, zettacomm.com. I noticed this this Wall Street Journal video. So I'm actually going to play it without audio. And can you tell us what we're seeing here?
Sure.
That, keeping in mind, many of the viewers will be listening and not necessarily watching.
Well, then they're going to have to go back and watch it.
They got to go back and watch it. But I watched this video. I mean, it looks like it's gorgeous. It's amazing.
Yeah, this is an architect that we work with. She built this amazing home for her family, and it is a 10,000 square foot home. It has a lot of really cool features inside of it, a lot of automated features. This, I think, was the first home that has a aircraft hangar door built into it, which is a feat inside of itself. The engineering side of it, how it's anchored and counter levered, it's pretty amazing. This has like a Star Trek theme, and so the center table is like this this kind of vertical angled shaft coming out of the ground that has this round glass table that is to kind of emulate Star Trek Enterprise. That's hovering over a 60-foot pool that has Michelangelo, God touching man, in mosaics on the bottom. And very beautiful, just gorgeous home. When you walk in there, you feel a little dwarfed because it's a very big open air space, and it's very beautiful. We have a theater in there as well. We have a 227-inch, 18-seat theater driven with a Sony projector. Pretty awesome experience in there. We did all of the acoustics, all of the audio, the video. Even helped with this piece here in automating this so that this glass
I've never even seen
piece
this
drops
before. Glass
and it kind of
drops.
hides. Yeah.
That's spectacular.
Yeah. This was the design detail that that Malika actually came up with, and then this also rises up out of the ground, and it has a pot filler built into it.
This is one of the more automated. I mean, this is like a real Jetsons house. There's like
Totally,
a lot
yeah.
of automation going on in the house.
Yeah, even the elevator is pneumatic, so you get into it and you stand in it, and it either sucks the air out and pulls you up, or it pushes air in and pushes you down. So it's really cool.
What year did you do this project?
2018.
Okay.
She's talking about it now.
This woman that's talking in the video, she's the owner of the house?
She is, yes.
Okay. And I'm assuming that if people go and watch this video, they'll know who she is, but is she a Silicon Valley executive of some type?
No, she actually owns a architecture firm.
She does.
It's one of our partnered architects.
Wow. This home is spectacular. I'm assuming that you got to do most of your integration solutions in the house, audio, video, control, lighting, you name it, it's here.
Yep.
How did the home ultimately end up getting shot and covered by the Wall Street Journal, the PR side of the equation? How did that happen?
Well, at the time we were trying to get some traction, and we were actually working, I think, with Nortec. Nortec actually helped out with the home because they saw that it was a really awesome space, and so they wanted to kind of donate some gear, donate some things, and then I think Griffin 360 got involved, and they also saw that it was just really amazing, and so they asked, they said, hey, would you like if we can get somebody else? I think it was them, if I remember right. But they said, would you like to see if we can get somebody else, like maybe the Wall Street Journal, to cover this? And yeah, then that happened. They reached out and they set it up with me, and said, hey, we would like to do a video shoot and interview the architect. And I was like, great. So I just passed that through, and so they were able to make that happen.
That's awesome. Do you find that you end up using this project or other projects that you have photographed? Do you use this in your resume when you're ultimately trying to win or solicit new business? Does this having this exist, is this helpful in that regard?
I would imagine. It's not necessarily something that I ask people about. Like, hey, have you seen my website? Have you seen our, recognition tab? But that's something that I don't really talk about. I think honestly, when it comes down to choosing an integrator, you obviously want somebody who's been there, done that. You don't want somebody that you're just, picking off the internet and you have no idea what they've done in the past, right?
Right.
But it does come back down to a personal approach as well. You want to feel like that person or that company that you're choosing is going to have your back, that they're going to be in it thick and thin. And if something goes down, they're going to help me fix it. They're not just going to walk away, right? Or they're not going to be like most integration companies that we've seen, they build it and then, they're done, right? They walk out. We get calls all the time. Hey, this other integration company built this, a few years back, like 2 years ago. And, try to call the guy and, nobody answers the phone. They don't have any maintenance, no nothing, right? So we pick up a lot of projects that somebody else built, and then we have to go back in and kind of retrofit to our systems. So I think that's really important for people to see that, we might not be the cheapest on the block, but we got your back, right? We're going to help you. We're going to monitor and maintain your home and your systems for you for the
What,
long haul.
Shawnon, why do you think our industry has that reputation of, I guess no other way to say it, sometimes abandoning their customer, finishing the job, moving on, and not working diligently to service that client or maintain that relationship?
To be honest, it's hard to scale. It really is. Um, it's hard to scale and build around you a team that can take care of those clients, because as a single integrator, as I did for many years, right? You get up to a point where you need to make money every day. You need to be able to produce and bring money in. And a lot of times the maintenance and running back to fix something isn't as profitable, right? Because it's warranty work or it's something else where they're just not making money. And I think integrators get burnt out. They get overwhelmed. They get burnt out just by not building carefully and not building good enough. I ran into, I have a few integrators that are really good friends of mine around the area. And what I've seen is that when integrators build their company around them and their skill set, they're going to fail at some point, because they're the programmer, they're the designer, they're the installer. They hire some installers to help them, but they can only do so much. And then, 16-hour days, which I'm very accustomed to working. Those get really tiring really fast, and people just burn out. And so I think the key to that success, and I think a lot of smaller firms don't really catch on to this, and they don't really know how to scale to that next level, is you have to hire other skill sets. You have to be able to take hats off, right? And you have to build that way.
Learn to delegate.
Learn to delegate, but also like hire people that are better than you, and hire people that can take hats off of yourself. Like if you're, you need programming, then hire some programming. If you need project management, hire some project management. But you have to hire people in those skill sets that can actually help take those burdens away from you. And I think that that's one of the key aspects of our growth. And when we actually started to catapult forward, it was when I started not really building around me any longer.
I think that's sound advice, whether you're running an integration firm or you're running probably most small or medium-sized businesses, is exactly what you said. Couldn't say it better. The idea that businesses are built around the owner founder. And when you learn to grow beyond that and actually, in fact, have a business that's more than the owner or the founder,
Yep.
you have something that's truly scalable. And then that owner and founder might not have to work 16 hours a day.
Yeah.
And they might even be allowed to take a vacation every now and again.
Yeah.
And it's even better when you're on vacation and your customers are getting better service because of the company that you built.
Yep. Exactly.
I think that's when magic happens.
Yep.
At a high level, and I've been asking all my guests this question, Shawnon. I think we're in a wonky economy right now. I don't think I'm stating anything other than the obvious. How are things in your market? The Silicon Valley space. I know just through some other observations that, your marketplace, like Silicon Valley Bank, was a big bank that collapsed, I think, in the fall. I think that
Yep.
was tied to some crypto, or no, that was tied to interest rates and some, I don't know. I've watched some different versions of why that happened. And then anyone paying attention has heard about some of the layoffs at Facebook and Twitter and things like that. What are you seeing locally in terms of business, and how do you, if you were to get your magic 8 ball and look into the forward next 6 to 18 months, what are you seeing in your local economy?
Well, I think, I think this is going to be a dip for sure. But I think it's going to recover.
Yeah.
And in this area specifically, I think there are certain clients that are pulling back and, definitely being a lot more conservative in their builds. And they have a house that's framed and needing to move to the next level, right? And I don't know if they're not able to get the loans or what the deal is, but some of them are pulling back and, paring back 75%, right? Like,
Wow.
pretty harsh. And so they're investing more in just the pre-wire and a network, which we advise. And then we can just kind of pick up the project after the fact, right? But we're designing it and going to be pre-wiring it for the future. And there's other clients that are not affected at all, right? Because they have funding, they have everything that they need, and they're building their house, and they're not going to stop,
Mm-hmm.
right? So we see, I guess it's just depending on which side of the spectrum you're on, as far as if there's any kind of holding back or full throttle.
Any particular technologies that have you jazzed, or that you find yourself talking to your clients, architects, designers? Like what's kind of a fun topic that you're finding yourself talking about or designing into projects these days?
You know what? I think the invisible speaker is an amazing invention. I do lean toward the transducer technologies, just because they have a little bit purer sound, and they hit more of an audiophile quality. But they're, it's great. You can put them behind things. You can put them behind paper, wallpapers, wood paneling, all kinds of really fun stuff to just make these speakers disappear. And that's kind of fun.
So to go a little deeper, what transducer type do you want to name drop? Give a manufacturer a shout out. Like what sort of brand
sure.
or brands do you like?
Yeah, I think Nakimatone is a really good brand. They have a really good speaker. We have it demoed in our showroom, and it's pretty awesome to just walk into a place that you can just hear everything and see nothing, right?
And I assuming that gets a lot of like, where's it coming from sort of responses from people that come in and listen.
Well, yeah, because it's it's definitely the cool part about it is because it's just got a dispersion factor of like 180 degrees, so you don't necessarily have to be in its path, right? Like a traditional speaker. You can literally stand next to it, 175-degree off, and you can still hear clear vocals. So it's really, really cool technology. And I think honestly, that's where the future of speakers are going to be going.
That's cool. Are you able to install the transducer alone, or do you have to round it out with a low end?
You do have to round it out with the low end because they drop down to about 60 hertz.
Okay.
And so you have to have something to fill that, 30 to 60 range.
Do you have a
But
go-to solution for the bottom end?
yeah, we're experimenting a little bit right now with the invisible side.
Okay.
We don't really have we have a few brands that we use, but they're not invisible, right? Amina makes one. Amina makes one that has a kind of a slot, and I think Nikimaton is also going to be producing a sub that's very similar to that style, like as far as invisible, but there's going to have some kind of an air path
Sure.
for it. And then, some of the other ones that we've used in this, just like in the ceiling, just a standard ceiling subs.
Because
But
I'm not
they're
that
not invisible.
technical, but you've got to move some air to get that lower frequency, right?
Yeah, you do.
Okay.
Yeah. But it's omnidirectional, so you don't necessarily have to.
Tucked away somewhere.
Yeah, you can just tuck it in, you can put it in the ceiling or in the wall, even in the floor.
Well, believe it or not, Shawnon, we're at that hour, man. It's been an hour. We've been sitting here chit-chatting. It's always fun when it goes by in a blink.
That went by pretty quick.
That did, right?
It totally did.
For those that are tuned in and they want to get in touch with you directly, where would you send them?
They can go to the website, zettacomm.com, or they can email sales@zettacomm.com.
Okay.
That would be key. If they want to get directly in touch with me, you can it's my first name, Shawnon@zettacomm.com.
Awesome. And we'll put all of those pieces of information in the comment section here on social media, and we'll also put it in the show notes. For those of you that are listening or watching, remember, if you go to onefirefly.com, you can actually see all of our podcast episodes back from day one, back in April 2017. Everything's there on the website under the podcast section. So, Shawnon, want to thank you so much, man, for joining me here for show 245.
Thanks, man. Thanks for the invite.
Awesome. All right, folks, there you have it. Show 245 with Shawnon Parkinson, president of Zettacomm. I've gotten to know Shawnon a bit over the last year. Shawnon's actually been participating in the Sony marketing program. He's a diamond dealer, and so reached out to him with that program, and have had a bunch of fun conversations, and definitely thought after Shawnon, he didn't even get into. He's told me so many fun stories from his past and the people that he's networked with. I was like, man, I got to have you on the show. And I was honored to have him say yes, and his being able to join us here on Monday, June 19th. So appreciate all of you tuning in, those that have tuned in live, watching it on recording, and or if you're listening on the podcast, don't forget to subscribe. You can go to your favorite platform, whether that's Spotify or I think majority of our listeners actually generally tune in on Apple Podcast. I know that's where I listen to a lot of my podcast content, and follow the shows, and appreciate you all tuning in. And you know what? I think I actually forgot to bring up my show art. I was so excited to have Sean, and Annie came in early and we were chit-chatting. I forgot to pull my show art up. So I'm going to sign off just like this, and I will see you all next time. Thanks, everybody. Be well.